I'm so happy to have you here with me today. If this is your first time listening, thank you for joining. If you've been listening for a while, welcome back. This story is about a man named Daniel who lived in a small village with little money and few chances. But Daniel had something very special, a deep passion for reading and learning. Even though his life was simple and sometimes hard, he dreamed big. You might wonder, how can one person change the world with just books? That question is at the heart of Daniel's journey. It is a story full of hope, courage, and the power of small actions. Through Daniel's experience, you will see that no matter where you come from or what challenges you face, your dreams matter. Books are not just stories on pages. They are keys that open doors to new worlds and new opportunities. As you listen and read, this story will help you improve your English. You will practice understanding spoken English, learn new words, and hear sentences that are easy to follow but full of meaning. Most importantly, you will feel inspired to believe in yourself and your own dreams. So, get comfortable and open your heart. Let's begin the journey of Daniel, the man who changed the world with books. This story is for you, for anyone who wants to grow, learn, and make a difference. Are you ready? Let's start. Chapter 1. A Simple Beginning. Daniel lived in a small village far away from the busy cities and bright lights. The village was quiet, with only a few houses made of wood and stone. The streets were narrow and dusty, and the people lived simply. Daniel's house was one of the smallest in the village. It had old walls and a weak roof, but inside it was filled with something very special: books. From a young age, Daniel loved to read. Books were his best friends, even when he had no one else to talk to. Every morning after finishing his small chores, he would sit by the window with a book in his hands. The stories took him to different worlds. He learned about places he had never seen, and met heroes who showed him courage, kindness, and hope. For Daniel, books were more than just pages and words. They were doors to dreams. But life was not easy for Daniel. His family had very little money. They could not buy new books or even many supplies for school. Sometimes the wind blew hard through the cracks in the walls, and the cold nights made it hard to sleep. The village had no library, no bookshops, and very few people cared about reading. Most people worked in the fields or the market, and they thought books were a luxury Daniel could not afford. Even so, Daniel never stopped dreaming. He wished to share his love of books with others. He imagined a place where everyone could read, learn, and grow. He wanted to bring books to the children who, like him, had little but big dreams. Sometimes, he would look up at the sky and wonder if his dream could ever come true. Daniel's days were simple, but his heart was full. He collected old books from neighbors, swapped stories with a few friends who liked to read, and wrote down his thoughts in a small notebook. His world was small, but inside it was wide and bright. He believed that knowledge could change everything. At times, Daniel felt lonely. Many people in the village did not understand why he cared so much about books. Some laughed and said, "Why waste time with stories? Work hard and be strong. That's life." These words hurt, but Daniel held on to hope. He knew his dream was important, even if others did not see it yet. The contrast between Daniel's poor village and his rich imagination was clear. Outside, the village was quiet and poor, but inside Daniel's mind there was color, light, and endless possibility. This small man, with simple clothes and humble hands, carried a fire that no money could buy. One evening, as Daniel sat under a tree reading by the soft light of the setting sun, he made a decision. He would try to bring books to his village and beyond. It would not be easy, and he did not know how, but he believed it was worth trying. The dream that had lived quietly in his heart was ready to grow. With this hope, Daniel stood up, feeling both nervous and excited. The journey ahead would be full of challenges, but also full of promise. He took a deep breath, ready to start a new chapter of his life. This simple beginning, in a small village with only a few books, was the start of something greater. Daniel's story was not just about books, it was about courage, hope, and the power of dreams. And it was just the beginning. Chapter 2. The Spark of an Idea. One day, Daniel traveled to the nearby town to sell some handmade baskets. The town was larger and louder than his village, with many people rushing through busy streets. As he walked, his eyes caught sight of an old, forgotten building at the end of a quiet lane. The sign above the door was faded, but he could still read the word, Library. Curious, Daniel pushed open the heavy wooden door. Inside, dust floated in the air like tiny stars, and the shelves were mostly empty. A few old books lay scattered on the floor, their pages yellowed and torn. The silence in the room was thick, broken only by the creaking of the old wooden floorboards. It was not the grand, bright library Daniel had imagined. It was broken, forgotten, and almost dead. Yet, as he stood there, Daniel felt something change inside him. This old, tired library was like a sleeping giant. It had once been a place full of knowledge and dreams. Now it was quiet and alone, waiting for someone to wake it up. Daniel imagined what this place could be if it was alive again. He saw children laughing, people reading books under the sun, and neighbors sharing stories. He pictured books traveling beyond the town, reaching villages like his own, bringing hope and change. The idea was simple, but powerful, to share books with those who could not afford them. Daniel believed that books could open new worlds, teach new ideas, and give people the tools to build better lives. He thought about how knowledge could break the cycle of poverty and loneliness that trapped so many. For the first time, Daniel's dream felt larger than just his village. It was a dream for the whole world. But as the excitement grew inside him, so did a shadow of doubt. How could he, a quiet man with little money and no special skills, bring life back to this broken library? How could he collect enough books to share? What if people laughed at him or said it was impossible? These questions filled his mind like heavy stones. Fear crept into his heart, whispering that maybe this dream was too big, too hard. When Daniel shared his idea with his family and friends back home, their reactions were not kind. His father shook his head and said, "Daniel, why waste your time on old books? We need food and work, not dreams." Some neighbors called him foolish. Even his closest friend warned, "You cannot change the world with books. It's a nice thought, but life is different. Be practical." Their words hurt Daniel deeply. He felt torn between the hope shining inside him and the cold voices telling him to give up. Doubt began to grow like a dark cloud covering his bright dreams. Some nights, he lay awake, wondering if he was foolish to believe. Was he chasing something that would never happen? Yet, despite the fear and discouragement, A small flame of hope continued to burn inside Daniel. He remembered the joy that books had brought him. He thought about the children in his village who had never held a book in their hands. The idea of giving them the chance to read, to learn, to dream, was too important to let go. Daniel realized that every big change begins with a small step. The broken library was not a sign of failure. It was an opportunity waiting to be taken. The doubts around him were challenges to be faced, not walls to stop him. He understood that the road ahead would be hard, but the dream was worth fighting for. That night, as the village slept, Daniel sat by the fire and made a quiet promise to himself. He would try. He would find a way to bring books back to life, to open doors for those who had none. The spark of an idea had been lit, and now it was time to protect it, to feed it, and to watch it grow. This moment was the beginning of Daniel's journey, not a clear path, but the first step toward a future full of hope. It was the clash between a dream and doubt, fear and courage, that shaped his heart. And with that small flame, Daniel was ready to face whatever came next. The story of the broken library was no longer just about a building. It was about a man who dared to believe in the power of books to change the world, even when others did not see it yet. Chapter 3. The First Step. With the spark of his idea glowing brightly, Daniel knew he had to start somewhere. The old library in town was too far and forgotten for now, so he turned to the place he knew best, his own village. Daniel decided to collect old books, any books, from the people around him. He believed that even small pieces could come together to build something bigger. Early one morning, Daniel began his journey by visiting the nearest houses. His heart beat fast with a mix of hope and fear. He knocked on doors and smiled warmly as he explained his dream. "I want to share books with everyone. Do you have any old books you no longer need?" he asked politely. But many doors closed quickly. Some people said, "We don't have books to give," or "Why would we give away our books?" Others just shook their heads or looked at him as if he were strange. Daniel felt the sting of rejection many times that day. Each no was a small weight on his shoulders. The village was poor and books were rare treasures. It was hard for him to understand why people didn't want to help, but Daniel never gave up. Still, not everyone refused. A kind old woman handed him a thin book with a gentle smile and said, "Take this. It helped me once. Maybe it can help someone else." A school teacher gave him a pile of worn-out storybooks. Even a young boy found a comic book he was willing to share. These small acts of kindness warmed Daniel's heart and gave him new strength. Slowly, Daniel's collection grew. It was not much, a few dozen books stacked carefully on a wooden table in his small home. His house was simple, with cracked walls and a dirt floor, but in one corner, Daniel made a special space just for his books. He cleaned the shelves as best as he could and arranged the books with care, imagining how they might travel to other hands one day. Every night, Daniel looked at the small pile and felt a quiet pride. The books were more than just paper. They were hopes waiting to bloom. Sometimes he read to himself by candlelight, dreaming about the future when many more people could read and learn. The work was slow and hard. Daniel often walked long distances between houses, carrying heavy bundles of books on his back. His hands were rough and his feet tired. There were days when he felt invisible, as if no one noticed his effort. He wondered if the dream was too big for one man, but in those quiet moments, Daniel reminded himself why he began. Each book represented a chance for a child to learn a new word, for a farmer to understand better ways to grow food, for a mother to find stories to tell her children at night. This belief was his fuel when the road felt long and lonely. Sometimes neighbors stopped to ask what Daniel was doing. When he shared his story, some smiled and nodded, beginning to believe with him. A few even offered to help carry books or spread the word. These small connections planted the first seeds of a community around Daniel's dream. Daniel's early days were filled with both struggle and hope. The contrast was clear. Many doors closed, but a few opened wide. The heavy silence of rejection was broken by the warm voices of kindness. Though the journey was just beginning, Daniel could feel his dream growing stronger. This slow start was important. It showed Daniel the power of persistence and the value of every small step. The books in his home were humble, but they carried the promise of a future filled with knowledge and change. As the pile of books grew, so did Daniel's determination. He knew the next challenge would be to share these books beyond his own house, to reach more people, and to keep the dream alive. And so, with a heart full of quiet courage, Daniel prepared for the next part of his journey, the moment when his dream would begin to touch the lives of others in ways he never imagined. Chapter 4. The Growing Movement. As the days turned into weeks, something wonderful began to happen. The word about Daniel's small collection of books spread beyond the quiet paths of his village. People started to talk, at the market, in the fields, and during the evening gatherings. "Daniel is collecting books for everyone," they said. "You can borrow them for free." Slowly but surely, more people came to Daniel's little house, curious and hopeful. At first, it was only a few neighbors, but soon the children began to arrive. Their eyes sparkled with excitement as they stepped into the small space filled with books. For many of these children, it was the first time they had seen so many stories and pictures all in one place. Daniel watched as the children gathered around, sitting on the floor and flipping through pages with careful hands. Their smiles were like rays of sunshine, brightening the dusty room. Hearing their laughter and questions made Daniel's heart swell with joy. He felt as if his dream was finally coming alive. But with this joy came new challenges. The small corner of Daniel's home quickly became crowded. Books piled up in every available space, and soon there was no room left for new donations. The laughter and chatter filled the air, but so did the noise of many feet and restless children. Daniel realized he needed a bigger place. At the same time, the demands of the growing movement weighed heavily on him. People wanted more books, more stories, and more ways to learn. Daniel felt the pressure of responsibility. He wanted to give everything he could, but his resources were limited. He had no money to rent a new space or buy supplies. Some nights, Daniel lay awake, worrying about what to do next. The loneliness he once felt had changed into a different kind of burden, the burden of leadership. Yet, even in those moments of doubt, his hope remained strong. He remembered the faces of the children, their eager eyes shining bright in the dim light. Slowly, helpers began to join Daniel. Friends who believed in his mission offered their hands and hearts. Some helped organize the books, while others spread the word to nearby villages. Together, they cleaned a small, empty room in the village school and moved the books there. It was not perfect, but it was bigger and brighter. The community's support grew stronger. Farmers brought baskets of fresh fruit for the children who visited. Mothers offered to tell stories on special days. Even the village elder, once doubtful, praised Daniel's work and encouraged others to join. Despite the difficulties, Daniel felt more alive than ever. The contrast between the quiet loneliness of his early days and the lively energy of the growing library was like night and day. The small dream that once seemed so fragile was now a living, breathing part of the village. Daniel understood that this was only the beginning. The library was no longer just his project. It was a shared hope for a better future. Every book, every visit, and every smile showed that change was possible, even in the smallest places. As the movement grew, Daniel prepared for the next challenges ahead. With his community by his side, he felt ready to face whatever came next. The journey was far from over, but Daniel's heart was full of courage and faith in the power of books. And so, with joy and determination, Daniel stepped forward, ready to turn his simple dream into a lasting light for many. Chapter 5. Facing Opposition. As Daniel's library grew, so did the attention it attracted. But not all of it was good. Some people in the village began to speak against him. They did not understand why Daniel was so focused on books and learning. To them, life was about tradition, working hard in the fields, following old ways, and keeping things as they had always been. The local leaders were the loudest critics. They told Daniel that his library was a waste of time and money. "Why spend so much energy on books?" they asked. "Our children need to learn how to farm and survive, not read stories." Their words felt like sharp arrows, cutting deep into Daniel's heart. Sometimes Daniel heard whispers of threats. "Stop this nonsense," some warned quietly. "You are causing trouble." The fear that had once been distant now felt very close. For the first time, Daniel felt truly alone. He wondered if his dream was worth the pain. At night, when the village was quiet, Daniel's mind was full of doubt. He thought about giving up. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe books could not change anything. Maybe the villagers were right to resist. But then, Daniel remembered the faces of the children who came to his library. He thought about the joy in their eyes when they found a new story or learned something new. He heard again the laughter and hope in the small room where books lived. Those moments gave him strength. Daniel understood that his fight was bigger than just books. It was a fight for change, for a future where knowledge could open doors. It was a fight against fear, the fear of the unknown and the comfort of old ways. The opposition was hard, but it taught Daniel something important. Change is never easy. It makes people uncomfortable. It challenges their beliefs and their way of life. But that discomfort is part of progress. Daniel decided not to back down. Instead, he looked for new ways to show the value of his work. He began to invite the leaders and villagers to special events at the library. He told stories that connected books to their lives, stories about farming, courage, and hope. Slowly, some people started to listen. They saw the children learning to read, to dream, and to think. They noticed how the library brought the village together. Though some opposition remained, a small light of understanding began to shine. Even in the face of fear and criticism, Daniel's courage grew. He learned that believing in something important means standing strong, even when the world says no. His dream was no longer just his. It was a challenge to the whole village to imagine a better tomorrow. This difficult time pushed Daniel to be creative and brave. It pushed him to find new paths forward, new ways to keep the library alive and growing. The journey was hard, but Daniel's heart was full of hope. And so, with courage in his soul and a steady belief in books, Daniel prepared for the next steps of his mission, steps that would take him beyond the village and into the wider world. Chapter 6. A Big Opportunity. One morning, Daniel received a letter that surprised him. It was an invitation to speak at a community event in a nearby town. The organizers had heard about his library and wanted him to share his story. This was a chance Daniel had never imagined, a chance to reach more people and show them the power of books. At first, Daniel felt excited. He thought about all the children in his village who loved reading, and how many others might feel the same if they had the chance. But soon, nervousness crept in. Speaking in front of a large crowd was something he had never done before. What if he made mistakes? What if people did not listen? What if the same doubts and opposition followed him there? Daniel knew this moment was important. He spent days preparing his speech. He wrote and rewrote his words, trying to find the right way to explain why books mattered so much. He practiced speaking quietly to himself, then louder, imagining the audience before him. Slowly, his confidence grew, but the fear still remained. On the day of the event, Daniel's heart beat fast. The town hall was full of people, some curious, some skeptical. When Daniel stepped onto the stage, the room felt big and unfamiliar. He took a deep breath and began to speak. At first, his voice trembled, but as he shared his story, the lonely days collecting books, the children's smiles, the fight against doubt, something changed. The audience began to listen closely. Daniel saw faces soften, eyes brighten. Many people were inspired. They stood up to applaud, and some came forward afterward to offer help. Daniel felt a wave of hope, as if a new door had opened. But not everyone was convinced. A few voices in the crowd still questioned his mission. They said it was too difficult, too small to make a real difference. They doubted that books could change a community. Daniel listened carefully to both praise and criticism. He realized that success was not about making everyone happy. It was about planting seeds of change, even if some resisted. The speech was not an end, but a beginning, a moment to learn and grow. After the event, Daniel felt tired but strong. He understood that fear and hope often live side by side. Courage was not the absence of fear, but acting despite it. This big opportunity taught Daniel that sharing a dream takes bravery, patience, and resilience. It showed him that every step forward, even small or imperfect, moves the mission ahead. With new friends and new challenges, Daniel returned home ready to continue his work. The speech had changed him. It had made his vision clearer and his heart stronger. Now, Daniel faced the future with a quiet but powerful confidence. The journey was far from over, but he knew he was on the right path, one that could change many lives with the simple magic of books. Chapter 7. Building Bridges. After the speech, Daniel knew he needed to do more than just collect books. He wanted to build a strong community around reading. a place where people could come together, share stories, and learn. So, he began reaching out to local schools and organizations in nearby towns. At first, it was not easy. Some were unsure about working with him, but Daniel's passion was clear, and slowly, doors began to open. One day, a teacher at the village school invited Daniel to visit her classroom. He brought a small box of books and read stories to the children. Their eyes lit up with excitement, and laughter filled the room. Seeing their joy reminded Daniel why he started this journey. He felt a warm connection growing between him and the children, a connection built on hope and learning. Inspired by this success, Daniel organized the first book club at the village community center. It was a simple idea, a group of people meeting once a week to talk about books and share their thoughts. To Daniel's surprise, many came, from children to adults. The meetings became lively and full of energy. People who had never spoken to each other before now talked openly about their favorite stories and ideas. Volunteers joined too. Some helped collect books, others organized reading events for families, and a few even offered to teach basic reading skills. Daniel felt the loneliness of the past begin to fade. The village was becoming a place of friendship and teamwork. One evening, during a reading event under the stars, Daniel looked around at the smiling faces. Children sat close, listening quietly, as a volunteer read a story about adventure and courage. Parents talked and laughed nearby. Daniel's heart swelled with joy. This was more than he had hoped for. His dream was growing, becoming real. But Daniel knew this was only the beginning. The warmth of these new friendships gave him strength, but he also understood that with growth came new challenges. The book club needed more books, more space, and more helpers. And beyond that, Daniel dreamed of reaching even more villages, spreading the love of reading far and wide. Building bridges was not just about connecting people with books. It was about connecting people with each other. Through these friendships and shared moments, Daniel saw the power of community, a power that could change lives in ways he had never imagined. As the weeks passed, the village buzzed with energy. Daniel's mission was no longer just his own. It was a movement, one that grew from simple beginnings into something much bigger. And with every story shared and every new volunteer, Daniel felt his hope grow stronger. This time fear no longer held him back. Instead, success and connection pushed him forward, lighting the way to a future filled with possibility. But with every step forward, Daniel also sensed a bigger challenge approaching, one that would test everything he and his new friends had built. Still, he was ready. The bridges he had built gave him the courage to face whatever came next. And so, with a heart full of hope and a community behind him, Daniel prepared to take the next step on his journey, a step that would change not just his village, but many others to come. Chapter 8. The Crisis. One quiet night, everything changed. A fire broke out in the small building where Daniel's library had grown over the months. Flames quickly spread, and thick smoke filled the air. Daniel woke to the sound of shouting and rushing feet. When he arrived, his heart sank. The place he had built with so much care was burning. Books, the very soul of his mission, were turning to ashes. In the days after the fire, Daniel felt lost. He stood among the ruins, watching the blackened walls and piles of burnt paper. It was as if his dream was disappearing before his eyes. For the first time, he wondered if all his hard work was for nothing. How could he continue when so much was gone? The weight of loss pressed down on him, heavy and cold. The village was shaken too. Some people said it was a sign that Daniel should stop. "Maybe it's time to give up," they whispered. Their words echoed the fear and doubt in Daniel's own mind. He felt alone, even though the community had once rallied around him. But not everyone felt hopeless. A small group of friends and volunteers came forward. They did not see the fire as the end. They saw it as a challenge, a test of their strength and spirit. "We will rebuild," one woman said firmly. "This fire cannot destroy what you have started." Their faith gave Daniel a spark of hope. Slowly, he began to feel the courage return. The fire had taken many things, but it could not take the belief that books could change lives. Daniel realized that his mission was bigger than any building or collection of books. It was about the people, the connections, and the hope that reading brought. The community started to come together again, but this time with a new determination. Volunteers cleaned up the ashes, local businesses donated supplies, people shared their own books and stories. Daniel was touched by the kindness and support all around him. It reminded him why he had begun this journey. Yet, the path forward was not easy. Daniel faced difficult questions: how to replace so many lost books, how to find a new space, how to keep the community motivated after such a blow. Each question felt like a mountain, but Daniel knew he had to climb. This crisis forced Daniel to look inside himself. He had two choices: give up or fight on. The pain of loss was real, but so was the strength he found in the community and in his heart. Slowly, he made his decision. Daniel decided to rebuild, stronger and wiser than before. The fire had tested his mission, but it had not destroyed it. Instead, it became a turning point, a moment when hope battled despair, and hope won. This was not the end of Daniel's story. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with challenges, yes, but also with the promise of growth and renewal. And so, with a deep breath and steady heart, Daniel prepared to rise from the ashes and continue his journey. Chapter 9. Rising from the Ashes. After the fire, the village was quiet for a moment, as if it was holding its breath. But then, something incredible began to happen. People started coming together, ready to help Daniel rebuild what was lost. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers offered their hands, their time, and their hearts. Daniel watched with a mix of gratitude and determination. This was the moment when hope grew stronger than fear. The work was not easy. Every day, Daniel and the volunteers cleaned the blackened walls and swept away ashes. They carried bricks, painted new walls, and arranged shelves. Sometimes their hands ached and their bodies felt tired, but their spirits stayed bright. With each small step, the library began to take shape again, better, stronger, and more welcoming than before. Daniel remembered the first time a child walked through the door of the new library. Her eyes were wide with wonder, her smile bright and full of joy. In that moment, Daniel felt a deep happiness he had never known before. It was not just about books or buildings, it was about creating a space where dreams could grow. The library was no longer just his mission. It belonged to the whole community. As the days passed, more and more people came to the library. Children read stories, families borrowed books, and teachers brought students for lessons. The library became a gathering place, a symbol of what was possible when people worked together. Daniel often heard the laughter of children and the quiet whispers of readers lost in their books. It was a sound full of life and hope. Through this journey, Daniel learned something important. The mission he started was bigger than any building or collection of books. It was about resilience, the ability to face hard times and still keep moving forward. The fire had tried to destroy his dream, but it only made it stronger. Every burned page had been replaced with new stories, new friendships, and new hope. Daniel felt proud, but also humble. He knew the library's success was not just his. It belonged to the people who believed in the power of reading and learning. Together, they had created something that would last far beyond the walls of any building. Looking to the future, Daniel dreamed bigger than ever. He planned to take books to nearby villages, start reading clubs, and invite more volunteers to join the cause. He imagined a world where everyone, no matter where they lived or how much money they had, could open a book and discover a new world. The library was no longer just a place to read. It was a symbol, a beacon of hope and strength in a world that sometimes felt dark and difficult. Daniel's journey from loss to renewal showed that even in the hardest times, we can find the courage to rise again. As the sun set on the rebuilt library, Daniel stood quietly and smiled. The path ahead was still full of challenges, but his heart was full of faith. His story was not just about books, it was about the power of community, hope, and never giving up. And with that hope shining bright, Daniel was ready for the next chapter. Chapter 10: A Legacy of Books. Many years had passed since Daniel first held a dusty book in his small village. Now, the library he started was no longer just one place. It had become a network of libraries spread across many villages and towns. Each library carried the same hope and promise Daniel had dreamed of so long ago. Books were reaching thousands of people who had never had the chance to read before. The simple idea that started in a small, quiet home had grown into a movement that changed lives. Daniel often sat in the heart of his first library, now brighter and busier than ever. He watched children laughing and sharing stories, families learning together, and volunteers working with smiles on their faces. The library was full of life and energy, a place where dreams grew with every page turned. Daniel's heart felt full, remembering all the struggles and fears from his journey. The man who once felt small and uncertain now stood proud, knowing he had made a difference. Looking back, Daniel thought about the long road he traveled. He remembered the lonely days when people doubted his dream, the fire that almost destroyed everything, and the hard work it took to rebuild. But most of all, he remembered the small moments, the kind hands that helped, the children's eager eyes, and the quiet joy of a new book in someone's hands. These moments were the true treasure of his life. Daniel knew that his story was not just about books. It was about courage, the courage to believe in something better even when others said it was impossible. It was about small actions that add up to big change. One person's dream, combined with the kindness of many, had created something stronger than any challenge. This was the power of hope and determination. As he spoke to visitors and volunteers, Daniel shared a simple message. Everyone has the power to change their world. It doesn't take money or fame. It takes heart, patience, and the willingness to try. He encouraged them to find their own passion and use it to help others. Like the books in his library, their actions could open new worlds for people who needed them most. For Daniel, the greatest reward was seeing how far the dream had grown. He imagined a future where every village had a library, where every child had a book to read, and where learning was a gift shared by all. The legacy of books was not just about pages and stories. It was about building a world where hope and knowledge could shine bright. As the day ended, Daniel stood quietly by the window, watching the sun set over the village. The warm light filled the room with a peaceful glow, just like the feeling inside his heart. He smiled, knowing his journey had come full circle, from a simple man with a quiet dream to a leader who helped change many lives. Now, the story was not only his, it belonged to everyone who believed in the magic of books, the strength of community, and the power of never giving up. And this is where your own story begins. What small step will you take today? What dream will you follow, even if it feels hard or uncertain? Remember, like Daniel, you have the power to make a difference. Every word you learn, every idea you share, and every kind action you take can change the world around you. So keep reading, keep dreaming, and keep believing. Your journey is just starting, and the world is waiting for the mark you will make. Thank you for listening to Daniel's incredible story, the story of how one person's love for books can change many lives. I hope you felt inspired by his courage, patience, and kindness. Remember, Daniel's journey was not easy. He faced doubts, challenges, and even moments of loss, but he never gave up. His dream grew step by step because he believed in the power of books and the strength of community. Now it's your turn. What small step can you take today to follow your dreams? Maybe it is learning a new word, practicing speaking, or sharing a story with someone else. Every action, no matter how small, can lead to big changes in your life and the lives of others. Just like Daniel, you have the power to make a difference. If you enjoyed this story and want to improve your English with more inspiring tales, please listen again. Repeating stories helps you remember new words and understand English better. You can also practice speaking by telling the story in your own words. Don't forget to subscribe to Read and Learn English for more stories that will help you grow in English and in life. Share this video with friends who want to learn and be inspired. Keep dreaming, keep learning, and never be afraid to change your world. Thank you for being part of this journey. See you next time.